by the military-industrial complex.
It could be seen to move violently forward, violently forward, violently forward.
I'm just a patsy.
Like when they attack.
I said this once or twice, but it bears repeating. If you like your current insurance, you will keep your current insurance.
You think about the Army and the Navy and the missions they run to protect the world, they run on SAP.
Well, you have done a really spectacular job. I guess pretty much everybody at this table is your customer, so
Exactly.
That's not so bad.
Exactly.
I want to congratulate
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
And we're back. George, it looks like Christmas came early this year. You got your Quigley and Sutton sweatshirt in that blue. I can't remember what blue that is. Royal blue? Royal blue?
Yeah,
I think that's
it's
royal.
a strong blue. It's DNC blue, but I got I'm going to walk on Capitol Hill with this thing, and I bet you I get a couple people going, "Hey, Sutton, good seeing you."
You may. You know, it's funny because when I wear those things out in public, people look at me like they want to know, they want to think that they recognize the name of the school. Like you can read people's faces. The metadata is all right there. You know, they call those actually the metadata on your face actually has a technical term in neurolinguistic programming, which is micro expressions. But you can read people's micro expressions when you wear that shirt because they want to think that they know it. They want to think that they recognize it, and they're reaching back into their memory, going Quigley and Sutton, Quigley and Sutton. What is that? Where is that? Like, I know somebody who went there, or I met someone who went there once. It's a
quizzical look. It's a quizzical look.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, the haul didn't just stop there. I also have a Sherlock Holmes T-shirt that I was sent, a 3X, and it says "Life is weirder than reality is weirder than anything you can make up," which is certainly true. Which is certainly true. And then I got a pair of shoes, and so it's been a great Christmas. And I just got home and we able to check the haul here. It's been great.
Well, terrific. Lots of people have been getting the stealth power and the illusion of democracy for Christmas, and you got
and these shoes go with the Quigley and Sutton. So when I'm slamming on these guys when I go out there, and I just face plant these guys with the posterize them with my slam dunks on the 8-foot rim.
Right.
These little 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds that start pushing me around.
Well, you were a college All-American at Quigley and Sutton, weren't you?
Yeah. Hell, I'm anything in my own mind. Yeah. So it's a beautiful story.
Yeah, I wonder if our good friend Jason Goodman knows anything about Quigley and Sutton University. I doubt it.
I think he'll pixelate it for 6 years and then bypass the critical moments of the impeachment inquiry till it's too late, and then he'll unpixelate. Indeed.
So where do you want to start today? You did an interesting space. You did an interesting space today where you joined a few stories together, but you started talking about the Blackberries again, and that kind of between what's the name of the guy who lived on the kibbutz?
Eric Braverman.
Between Eric Braverman and the Blackberries, I think that those are the two oldest George Webb stories that I know. But the Blackberries really do, to quote George Webb, go the full flight of the arrow. Your entire career has had Blackberries involved in it, and so it reminds me of going back. I made some stickers when we had our Zoom call this week. I talked about my some of my sticker adventures but I did make Ted Lieu and Xavier Becerra stickers. Once saying "Spying in Congress." Is that what it was? I can't remember what it was, but I tried to get it to be a meme. And I'm pretty sure Ted Lieu became aware of it because at one point I rode my bicycle up and down the Venice boardwalk, which was Ted Lieu's territory, and I put Ted Lieu "Spying in Congress" stickers on every pole that separated the bike path from the parking lot. So as you were riding your bicycle down the bike path in Venice Beach, I had Ted Lieu "Spying in Congress" stickers everywhere.
Yeah, and there was asked me about the Awans and so forth. Well, my latest story, I had to figure out something that rhymes with super because Super Antigen, I really didn't have a plush toy or anything. So I went with the Super Hornet. I went with the Super Hornet, the F-18. And yeah, so I got,
you got the Blue Angel version there.
Yeah.
I actually went and spent a day with the Blue Angels in El Centro, California.
Oh, wow.
I had a roommate who was a TV star at the time, and he got invited to fly in the Blue Angels. And as I famously tell this story, he was always accusing me of being jealous of him. And truth be told, I was jealous of him once in my life, and that was when he got to climb into the cockpit of an FA-18 and take off. I shot those pictures for Us magazine. I don't even know if Us magazine is still a magazine, is it? I don't know.
I'll look it up here. You know, I thought Us magazine was kind of like a Vogue or something like that. But
no, it's really just kind of like cheesy celebrity pictures.
It's still a thing. Yeah, I can see Us magazine right here. Yeah. That's sort of maybe like something that you'd find on the as you're checking out at the supermarket kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Yeah. Well, maybe Hunter Biden, I hear, is flying into the White House. First of all, back to Ted Lieu he was the famous guy who flushed his Blackberry down the toilet.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
And I kid you not, I was in Comer's office a couple Fridays ago, and we're talking to the folks in there, and I heard just this mad flushing. His office is not too far from the restroom on the 4th floor on Rayburn office. Just this mad flushing, almost like, a police raiding a drug lab,
right?
Crazy. And then it looked like Ted Lieu coming out of the thing. And then right after that, Adam Schiff. So I don't know if this has created a whole new flush network. Who knows? We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. But here's the, let me see, present, share screen. So yeah, so here's a picture I took at the when I was in El Centro, California. This is my actor friend Brian Wimmer, and that's the plane that he climbed into. I took the picture right before he climbed into the plane, and he took off. I was jealous. Yeah, but you know what? I used to have more of a love for these aircraft than I do now because they really are killing machines. They're designed to kill people. And as beautiful and as technologically advanced, I think my friend Javon and I were having a kind of a trade back and forth on Twitter today because unfortunately, the military industrial complex drives a lot of the innovation in technology. I mean, the internet is an invention of DARPA. All of these things that are being used against us were originally conceived as things to protect us by DARPA. It's just kind of sad that we can't figure out better things to do with technology without first trying to figure out how to kill people with them.
Well, if you go back to the original National Science Foundation network, NSFNet, where it was linking all the universities that were doing nuclear mathematical work, figure out how big the piles need to be and how, the Crytron, switch, the whole thing about nuclear weapons. So really the first days they called it the ARPANET, but very quickly it left places like Santa Barbara and went to places like, Columbia, Maryland and Fort Meade,
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah.
So we didn't get to do the show on Sunday, but I did get a copy of my book to Jimmy Dore and to Kurt. And Kurt was on Richard's show after that, and he almost started to make a bit out of me, but I think he pulled back because he hadn't really read the book yet, and he knew that I knew Richard. So he said, he goes, you know, in the old days, when you did stand-up comedy, when you did the meet and greet at the end, people would give you drugs. Now people give you their self-published books.
That's funny.
Yeah, it was funny. It was funny. Yeah.
Well, and Jimmy Dore is funny. I'm not necessarily in agreement with his politics, bigger government and everything, but he is. I love the way Jimmy Dore.
Well, you know what? If I might, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but Jimmy Dore, I think is one of the few people, kind of like us, I think, that is perfectly willing to say, I believed this last week and I don't believe this anymore. Things are changing. He's still, my big takeaway after his show is hysterical. Kurt's show is hysterical. If you can go see him live, you should go see him live. They're very funny. And it's interesting too. Wait, let me bring this picture back up again. It's like, I know that this is about as good a picture, I think, as I've ever seen of myself, my wife together, but Kurt looks really good and Jimmy looks really good. And Jimmy looks 10 years younger when you see him in real life than you see him on his show. And I was thinking a lot about lighting. I was thinking a lot about John O'Loughlin and how good his lighting is on his show. And after I took this picture, I thought I really need to up my lighting game because look how great Jimmy looks in this picture compared to the way that he looks on his podcast. He really looks great with all that stage lighting. So,
and you are Peter Duke. You are the lighting master of all time. So, but anyway, the funny thing I think about Jimmy is he always acts like somebody just wheeled in the monitor, the big screen TV behind him with the document. Like he wasn't aware, like Candid Camera, he wasn't aware that they would be wheeling in the big monitor. And then he always goes, it's right there. He always turns around and like, hey,
right,
that document's right there. It always seems like he's surprised when the document appears behind him.
Well, he and Kurt are definite performers. The other thing that I noticed in the show is that Kurt set up. I think he's on the road a lot. I don't know how he possibly could have gotten from Oxnard, California, back to wherever he lives, unless he lives in Ventura or something, in time for Richard's show. So he's got a mic. So I don't know what his setup is, but he's definitely about this close to the camera. And he's got such a theatrically expressive face. And when he's doing his stand-up thing, he really does use his face a lot as part of his act. And I think that those two guys, if they could bring their video game up to their stage game as far as their facial expressions and their lighting, that would be next level. That is, I think that it would be a lot better because those guys, there was a lot on the stage that I was looking at, that I was seeing with my photographer's eye, that I don't see when they're doing podcasts.
Well, we've been talking about, Hillary, and he's even though he's on the left, he's still pretty good. Jimmy Dore is really good about going after Hillary, So that's one thing I like about Jimmy Dore. The Blackberries, he's always making fun.
Right.
He's always doing the pantomime of the Blackberries being smashed and everything. So I love Jimmy Dore because he's funny and he makes fun of Hillary. And we all can laugh at Hillary. The smashing of these Blackberries and the grinding and shredding of all the laptops as they're destroying evidence is fun. It's just fun. So I enjoy that.
Yeah, but I mean, he can, he was vaccine injured too, which is kind of like me talking about the protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, because I worked at the Shoah Foundation Institute and the Simon Wiesenthal Center. I can I have like
Immunity.
I have a force field around me.
Yeah.
But he's vax injured. And so, he can make jokes that other people can't make. And they're kind of hard to laugh at, but because they're so real. But the one thing that I was thinking as I was watching his show, and he does do this all the time, is that he's a big Malone fan. And I was thinking if I could do one thing after the show, besides, and we did a Zoom call where we were talking about public affairs, like my getting that picture was a coup, because my thought was, if I can get a good picture with them holding the book, there's a much better chance that Kurt might actually open the book and read it than if I just handed it to him, because it's like with the picture, he's kind of committed now. Right.
Yeah,
So
that's very clever. That's a good trick. Get the celebrity to hold your book up.
Right. Because I was thinking I got 5, because there was a line of 300 people behind us, or maybe 100 people. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but there was a big line. We got to be the first in line just because it was all serendipity. Like, we were a little late. We wound up sitting in the exact right space. It was, I know Richard Grove. So I hit Kurt with, I'm friends with Richard Grove. I just want to give you a copy of my book. And I handed it to him and Jimmy. He turned around, he pimped my book for me. Thanks, Kurt. And once we got the picture and I saw the picture and I saw how good it was, I thought, okay, he'll read the book now. I know he'll read the book. So
and it's great lighting. You can tell it's the stage lighting, so that it's just bathed in light. It's really great lighting. And I think a lot of people have tweeted it out. And they think somehow you're on the road. Everybody keeps asking me, are you still going to be doing the show? It looks like Peter's gone on the road with Jimmy Dore. And I said, no. That's just the promotional picture. He's coming back. So people were worried Sunday that you had left and gone off and become a stage performer. And I said, no. And I ended up doing a space on Sunday because it was my fault. I was traveling and it wasn't conducive to bandwidth for the video, but I did do an audio space as a filler. And everyone was asking, is Peter, who's going to be the warm-up guy? Is it going to be Jimmy Dore?
I can barely do this video without saying and off 500 times during the show. So I'm getting better, but
there's a program, speaking of AI, and I'll just mention it, bring it up. There's a program that I was introduced to called Descript. I think you talked to me about Descript too, where it'll take the video or
the ums and ahs.
Yep, and take out all the filler words. And then the other thing it added now is to take out the spaces. So sometimes you have a little delay as people are waiting to talk on a space or whatever, and it compresses everything down to a second. So I had an hour space that I did that editing. Plus you take out things that are just kind of, hi, how are you? Good to see you, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
It went from an hour down to 35 minutes. So that's really like taking an interest.
That's synthesis.
Yeah, that's taking interest in the customer and their time and appreciation for the time and trying to reduce it down just to the juice and get rid of all the other stuff. And it's really worth doing. I'm going to do more of it.
Right. Well, it reminds me of this book that I recommended last week, is that I got this one book called Conjuring Hitler, which I haven't read yet because it's big. It's a big book. And it's well documented by Guido Giacomo Preparata. But he did this book in 2005. This just came out in November. I think I got it as soon as it came out, and it's called The Incubation of Nazism, and it's basically the Reader's Digest version of the other book. And this book is, I'm 2 or 3 chapters into this book. This is a great book. Boy, does it do a good job of explaining Mackinder and the British Imperial, the Anglo-American establishment. And if you want to understand Ukraine and Israel, what's going on right now, I highly recommend this book. But it's really synthesized. He's really taken that big book and he's just shrunk it down to the essential things that you need to know in the much bigger book. And so I think that's, you and I kind of started off talking about this three or 4 years ago, but that is the future, I think, is creating media that fits into the lives of people.
Yeah, and I think also that they want value add. You know, it's like, okay, it would be great for you to throw in graphics, and for every time you mention a proper noun, what I would love to see is these programs go create. You know, every time you say a proper noun that's not recognized, in as far as Grammarly goes, they go get, you know, like Google search when you do a name search, it goes and grabs you like 7 or 8 images of that person, right? And then I want to just be able to drag over the picture that I want of that person out of the 7 or 8 thumbnails. I want to just be able to drag it over into that paragraph, and then it's just an animated space. And I think this is where we're going to go. You know, I think people want the value add. Some people just don't. You know, they're driving, they want the audio, but other people are like, hey, I want to know when you say a name, I want to know. Give me a picture and give me some kind of context of the person. So I think we're going to be looking more and more at these AI tools. You do the same thing with meme creation and these great graphics you're creating. And so this can be fun. This can be a fun 2024.
Well, it's going to make the things that we talk about that much more important, and that is storytelling versus critical thinking. The art is going to get so good. I mean, right now I could type in a prompt and it comes up with a still image. It's not a very large leap, and I know that they're already doing this in other places. I could probably, if I wanted to pay more money, I probably could. You could put in a prompt and it comes up with a video. As these things get better and better, the ability to discern fact from fiction is going to become a life skill. That is your ability to determine whether or not the story that someone is telling you is true or correct or in your best interest to believe is going to wind up becoming a lot more important than, oh, gee whiz, did you hear what so-and-so said? The question is going to be, do you believe that video that's going around where so-and-so said this? Because at this point, you know, bringing it back to Jimmy Dore for a second, you know, he gives big kudos to Robert Malone. And I just wonder if he had an hour on his show talking to George Webb, whether or not he would feel so comfortable with Robert Malone as he does right now. And again, we just have questions for Robert Malone. And we know that Robert Malone has been on some of our friends' shows many, many times and never gotten asked the hard questions. And Jimmy had Ramaswamy on his show yesterday. And Ramaswamy, he made Ramaswamy dance like there was no get out. And his comment about Ramaswamy to his face was, "I would never buy a used car from you." Because I would, because you're that good. You know, I if you were selling used cars, I would never walk onto the lot because I would be walking off with a clunker. You know.
Yeah.
You know, and Ramaswamy took it all in. You know, the one positive thing that I have to say about him, I mean, I trust him as far as I could throw him, and you've done a great job of kind of exposing all of the different things. To his credit, Jimmy had a lot of interesting information that you also have about Ramaswamy. He doesn't have the full dossier like you do, but he's got a lot of it. And he was talking about it in real time. His ability to remember all of this stuff, like your ability to remember all of this stuff, is better than mine. Like I have to go with notes. I can't remember it all. But the thing that I will credit Ramaswamy with is that he seems to take everything. What's the best way for me to frame it? And this is where I'm not a professional broadcaster. He seems to take everything in good humor. He will laugh at himself when people are making fun of him. He did come up with, you know, Jimmy was calling him out on some things that he said about supporting Israel's carpet bombing Hamas, and Jimmy's comment. I'm trying to remember what the comment was about him, and now I've completely spaced. Again, my memory isn't that good, but Jimmy maintained a high level integrity, and Ramaswamy maintained his sense of humor through the whole thing. So, you know, it was a really interesting thing to watch.
Well, you know, Ramaswamy strikes me as a person, and I'm pronouncing with a SCHW like you are, but it's Ramaswamy if it's
Right.
whatever. But but I like
it's the Yiddish I learned in the camera store.
I like Swami though. That's pretty good. I think he spent a lot of time in the well. You know, he spent a lot of time in the kind of moot court, debate court. You know, and a lot of time practicing. And you know, as far as I know, he's an attorney, but I don't think he spent a lot of time litigating. But you know, you do get into this repartee with judges where you have to have a facile mind to be able to quote various cases and so forth, and legal precedents and whatnot. And because a lot of the judges make these decisions on the fly, you don't get a chance to prepare a brief or whatever in oral argument. So he does have that kind of barrister's, or maybe a barrister's presence rather than a solicitor's presence or a trial attorney's presence. And he's good at it. He's good at it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. That's also interesting too, because one of the things that I was thinking about when I was sitting there, when I was watching them do their stand-up, is that comedians are actually linguists. And to your point about Ramaswamy, I think lawyers, good lawyers, especially litigators, are also linguists in that they do have to analyze language in real time, and then they do need to formulate language strategies in order to be able to deliver. In the case of an attorney, they need to rebut whatever the other attorney is saying, or whatever a witness is saying in real time, or they need to reframe it in real time. The other thing that is that comedians need to figure out a way to take words, describe different scenarios in the world, and then turn them into humor, which usually has something to do with irony. There's usually a twist on their perspective and the quote unquote normal perspective on the world. But there's not a lot of difference in the way that people's brains work between comedians, lawyers, and hypnotists. They're all using very similar linguistic skill sets.
And I think there's something about Jimmy Dore and the really great comedians that they have a rhythm to their patter and pace, bada boom, butch, that whole thing. That it's either you practice that or you don't practice that. There's just a way that they have.
It's a setup punchline, setup punchline, setup punchline.
And then I did this, and I couldn't believe this, but then kabango, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and there was one thing that Jimmy did too that was reminded me. So in drama, there's something called Daedalus's thread, and it comes from the myth of Daedalus and the Minotaur. So Daedalus was the architect of the labyrinth, and his daughter was Ariadne, and I think it was Perseus who was sent down to be slaughtered by the Minotaur, and Ariadne fell in love with him, and she gave him a secret. And the secret that she gave him was a skein of thread. And she said, tie this onto the doorknob when you go into the labyrinth. And then after you kill the Minotaur, you'll find your way out. So Perseus goes in and he kills the Minotaur, and then he follows the thread and he comes out. So there's a device in drama called a Daedalian thread, named after that thread. And that is where you do a setup at the very beginning of the story. And the one that most people will know is use the Force, Luke. And I can't remember how Obi-Wan Kenobi sets it up. But at the end of Star Wars, he turns off the targeting computer, and everybody goes, he's turned off his targeting computer. And you hear Obi-Wan Kenobi's voice going, use the Force, Luke, use the Force. So this thing was set up at the very beginning of the movie when Luke Skywalker is in the swamp, right? With Yoda. And then at the end, he winds up being able to pull that out and use it. So it's kind of like that thread that runs through the labyrinth. I noticed that Jimmy, and this is a normal thing for comedians to do, but one of his setups he does at the beginning of the act, and he doesn't actually pay it off until the climax of the act, until the end of the act. So it's usually, so it goes like setup, payoff, setup, payoff, setup, payoff. But in this case, it's setup, setup, payoff, setup, payoff, setup, payoff, payoff, payoff. Like he brings the one that he started at the beginning in at the end. And that winds up becoming like a turbo laugh, like everybody laughs much harder. So I was sitting there thinking about the linguistics of it all. And
when you were explaining the Daedalian thread, the golden thread, I call it, because most people, associate. I really thought you were telling the story of meeting your wife at January 6th. You went in, you got the photo, you got Alex's picture, you got all these great pictures, you figured out the whisper mics, the backpacks, the black block. You came back, and there she was. I mean, it kind of was a Daedalian thread, was it not?
I don't think
Maybe
so.
not.
I don't think so. No, the
like that at all.
The Daedalian thread is always that thing that the hero learns in the first act of the movie, that they wind up pulling out at the end of the movie to solve the puzzle that winds up winning the day. That's the Daedalian thread of it.
Okay, so let me ask this question. I know that you guys you made eye contact, okay, but I think I was there on your first date in Los Angeles, right? So how much time? I think that's true.
She's shaking her head. Again, it's all a blur to me.
Well, there was a series of 3 dates that we were doing a charrette, and then.
Oh, that's right. That's right. We weren't. Technically we weren't dating though, were we? I think you were just hanging out.
No, we had started.
Okay. It's all a blur to me. I mean, it's funny.
Right.
George is right. Producer Jessica says.
Well, you guys were, brought together around the idea of, hey, elections should be fair, right?
Yeah.
It didn't start out with love, but then it ended in love. So isn't that a great way to, that to me is the reason, if nothing else, to buy your book, which is called Stealth Power and the Illusion of Democracy.
Stealth Power and the Illusion of Democracy. And somebody in the chat is saying, what's the name of the little book Peter's talking about? It's called The Incubation of Nazism. And if you go to thedukereport.com, it's on the front page there, on the left side, I think.
And let me tell you, the Duke Report has a lot of books that you couldn't get otherwise. And these rare book owners, they know that these are hard to get, and so they gunned up the price, like they're $70 sometimes, to get these things. It's like, if you want, I got this one for like $7, but the hardback was $70, right? And it says Anthrax is the only platform. It discounts all the other weapons.
So wait, this is the Biology of Doom. What is that, George? Tell me about that.
I like reading histories. This is a bad thing to do when you go into bookstores, by the way, and buy a warfare.
Right.
Book. I'm just a student. I'm just studying Stephen Hatfield. I'm just studying how you would wipe out villages in Africa.
Is that a Stephen Hatfield book?
Well, I mean, Anthrax is in here. They go through the history of bioweapons and how they went through every weapon, and none of them worked, and they were all impractical except one, Anthrax. So, but every one of them will have a little different piece of information, and you mosaic them together, and then you build your knowledge out. At least that's. I mean, like I say, if the FBI has a great dossier on me, because I'm buying all these bio warfare books, but it's the only way I know to.
The FBI or Amazon?
Well, the FBI,
or is it the same thing?
I was going to say there's maybe a millisecond delay before it hits the Amazon server before it gets over to the FBI.
Yeah, it's funny because somebody a long time ago used to make a joke that was friends of mine that they thought that the FBI that UPS was actually an arm of the FBI, and that FedEx was an arm of the CIA. And today, I'm not sure that I'm in too much disagreement there.
I think there's data sharing, and they might not be an arm of it, but there's definitely data sharing agreements at Amazon as well, and 23andMe. If you were promised, like I was with my family, that we'll never share the information, well, all you have to do is leave the door open one day, and then somebody walks out with a thumb drive,
or sell the company to somebody else, or get a search a warrant, or or what actually what 23andMe does is that they promise that they won't share your data with anybody, but then they invite you into a program where you can find your extended genomic family.
Yeah.
And at that point, all bets are off, because then you wind up going into this big public database.
But they just did have a hack also. So even if you opted out, China's got your data, you're being dossiered,
Yeah.
And who would have thought, you think you're trying to cure sickle cell anemia or cystic fibrosis, you're trying to find cures for everybody. Who would have thought that, oh, wait a minute, those are vulnerabilities that bioweaponeers would try to take advantage of? Who would have thought something like that? But it turns out probably to be the reality. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I was thinking this morning too, because I'm reading these books that are kind of really old history. Like I'm going back, between the last couple of days has been between like 800 AD and 1400 AD, like,
Wow.
and going through genealogies and things like that. And it occurred to me that, the definition of technology that I use is an invention or process for doing something better than you could do it before. And the definition of culture that I use is the values and processes that are used in order to manage a society. And it occurred to me that if you don't have electronics and you don't have things like movable type and printing and, kind of thermodynamic energy based technology, that culture winds up being the technology that you use in order to get a program in place, like taking over the whole world, that requires multi-generations. So it winds up becoming a part of your lifestyle. It winds up, and you need to pass it on to your children, because things that we take for granted now, like sending a message from one side of the world to another, just 100 years ago would have taken days, if not weeks, and 200 years ago might not have been possible at all. So you're talking about like a multi-generational approach to doing something. And I don't know where I'm going with this, except that to me, culture, I started thinking of culture as a technology today in a way that I hadn't thought about it before.
Well, that's interesting. I think if there was from medieval times, what you're talking about, to when the Freemasons started and so forth, and people, the guilds and the journeymen and whatnot, people started getting skilled labor, and they wanted to build these cathedrals, right? So if you've got, Notre Dame, and now the people over at Chartres, they want those same people. You got to go on the road. It's the Jimmy Dore show, so they have to go on the road. So now you need a messaging system and letters of transit and introduction, and now you're going to get robbed on the road, so you need gold certificates. The whole banking, and there's a whole bunch of things that come out of that period of time between 800 and 1400. That's a very interesting period.
Well, there's two or three books that I've read so far that indicate that the Freemasons were actually the survivors of the purge against the Knights Templar by Philip IV of France in 1308, I think, 1309. And for whatever reason, I'm trying to remember which king it was. Maybe it was King Charles. I can't remember which king it was. Gave, I think it was Charles II, who was kind of played as a wimpy do nothing in the movie Braveheart. He was like the wimpy son of Charles I was like this rock hard, mean guy, and Charles II was kind of this wimp in the movie Braveheart. But in real life, I think Charles II gave them like a 90-day reprieve. Like they had gotten an order from the Pope and Prince Philip to arrest all these Knights Templar, and they didn't do it for 90 days in Great Britain, which wound up allowing all of the Templars to move up into Scotland, which is why Scottish Rite Freemasonry became a thing. But at that point, it's unclear exactly how it happened, but that the Masons, who were actual stonemasons, wound up getting infiltrated by the Knights Templar, and then at that point it became Freemasonry, which is the story that you're talking about, which is that these people needed to be able to travel from town to town as basically citizens of the world in order to build all of these cathedrals. I don't know that that story is true, but I've heard the story before.
I think it's sort of true. You know, you have the sort of the Proud Boys, and then you mix the Ukrainians in there as they're going toward the bicycle, you know, thing.
Right. Well, that metaphor I think is that's a good metaphor.
Yeah, you mix them in, and that way, oh, well, those are stonemasons. Don't attack them because they're going to go build the next church. So, you know, easy up on those guys. So, but the Knights Templar do a lot in terms of the banking, and gold is heavy. Let's just carry the certificates, and then they do, I think, make a pilgrimage to Malta. They were in Jerusalem. I think they were successful with one of the Crusades.
Tracy Twyman, who's another researcher who unexpectedly passed away after publishing her last book. This is about 4 years ago, I think. Wrote a great book called, and you can find this book on the Duke Report, Money Grows on the Tree of Knowledge, I think, or Money Grows on the Tree of Life. There's 2 trees in the Garden of Eden, Tree of Knowledge, Tree of Life, I think. Anyway, Tracy Twyman has a great book that, again, it's a little book like the one that I was just holding up. It does knowledge. Okay, producer Jessica says, Money Grows on the Tree of Knowledge. That does a pretty good job of explaining that Templar, how the Templars basically invented banking or popularized banking, because I think that banking is older. I think it's Babylonian. I think that the idea of getting people to believe in a way that changes their reality by using words in order to reframe their reality, which, the Greeks called rhetoric, and, modern hypnotists called neurolinguistic programming, and marketers call advertising, that method is old, that it's really old. People have known about it for a long time. And money also is one of those kind of things that's a kind of magic, because it requires many people to believe in it. If they don't have a shared belief in it, like a religion, then it doesn't work. And likewise, people have to believe in the words that they're listening to or consuming in order to be able to have a news story upset them or make them happy or get them concerned about something.
So I was going in the direction of, it's a lot easier to believe in gold and a lot easier to believe in silver, like Judas with 30 pieces of silver, than it is a certificate that says George's Bank, and where I give the Knights Templar credit is they did come up with the paper representation, the fiat representation, and that was their thing. And they were the ones who were traveling between Christendom and the front, first biological warfare, the siege of Kaffa. They had to hang out in Kaffa, and they saw all these biological weapons. So, and they were kind of the, Pope's front vanguard, and they were bringing back their knowledge, to Christendom, and then Christendom and the Pope was spreading it out. So, I give the Knights Templar, it's sort of like the Phoenicians in the Mediterranean. They, the travelers and the traders tend to be the ones that are where the culture, the tree of knowledge,
right,
blossoms, So it's a fun group to study for sure.
Yeah, and it gets interesting with the Phoenicians too, because the Phoenicians used the same alphabet as the ancient Hebrews, and so you start looking at things, artifacts and things like that have these old glyphs on them, and a lot of people look at those glyphs and they assume, oh, this is an old Jewish thing, it's an old Hebrew thing. And indeed, it's not. It's they were separate societies. They used the same alphabet. They lived right next to each other, which probably made sharing the alphabet that much easier.
They had the first Rosetta Stone, though. See, they had that little cheat sheet
Mhm.
where they could go across the table and go, "Oh, you mean a lamb? You don't mean a pig? Oh, I get it." But
Indeed.
but the Rosetta Stone, with Egypt discovered a little bit later, but again, that's somebody who's a trader who speaks 5 languages, right? Because they have to. And
Right.
so I like the book. There's a book that was called the Color of Money. No, not the Color of Money. That was the Pool. The Story of Money is a very good book as well. It sort of goes through this story as well.
Yeah, I don't know if I have that or have it on the Duke Report. I have the 5,000 Years Debt. Again, a lot of these books I find because people who watch the show recommend them.
Mhm.
But Debt, the First 5,000 Years is a very good book too. Michael, I can't remember what his name is, who read it. Anyway, we haven't talked about Blackberries, George. You think maybe we should talk about Blackberry?
Well, I think I just basically remind everybody that this would be a very good way to get to the bottom of the story. I do 2 minutes every 3 or 4 days. I've been doing it for 7 years. I feel like it's just a tide. I have to remind people, whether, gradually I'll wear down the rocks, eventually, but it's what all law enforcement does. They go for the encrypted communication because that's where for the drug dealers and so forth. Or the people, printing counterfeit or whatever. They always go to the encrypted communications devices first because that's where they're hiding stuff. It's by definition the place to go if you're in law enforcement.
Right.
So why wouldn't we go after the encrypted devices of the Bidens? We're not guessing. I mean, here's Bob Yelinsky's, putting it up at the October 2020 presidential debate. So we know it's the answer. What I like now is sort of litmus testing people to say, well, would you subpoena the Blackberries if you could prove that all the Bidens had those and were using them for encrypted communications? I like asking that, kind of baiting people, and they go, "Oh yeah, of course. What's that? You're in luck. You're in luck. I got it right here." And then they're like, "Well, that might be getting into their privacy." They're always backing away. But I say to Comer, they flew Hunter Biden into the White House today on Marine One, unannounced. They didn't.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're not trusting their encrypted communications for the immunity, for the inquiry. They're all in person to person. So this is could potentially get interesting. But like Alex Jones, I invite you to ask everybody on Capitol Hill about the encrypted communications. Tucker Carlson, I ask you. There we go. Becerra, Mr. Becerra.
Yeah, these were stickers that I made that I used to put up on things.
Isn't he like the head of HHS now, or the?
He's had a like Kamala Harris. He's just had a rocket-like career. And just to remind people who are watching the show, Xavier Becerra, I believe, had the DCCC, the Democratic Committee. What was it?
Caucus. The Democratic Caucus, yeah.
Yeah, Democratic Committee. It was 3 C's though. DCCC. He had the BlackBerry server in his office, right? And when it was subpoenaed and he delivered the machine without a hard drive, I believe was the story.
Or it was bit beach blit or whatever that. Yeah.
He
changed.
Yeah, he technically fulfilled the subpoena by providing a piece of equipment, but it wasn't the equipment that was required in order to fulfill the information request. And then there's Ted, who dropped his BlackBerry in the toilet after. Was it subpoenaed before he dropped it in the toilet?
No, I think he was smart enough to get rid of it before. Yeah, it is. It's just too much fun. The story is too much fun, and there's 45 of these stories in Congress, and they're all running away from the story as fast as they can, and it's the thing that keeps dogging them through their whole congressional career. It's just a gift that keeps on giving. So we're helping them out. I always go up there every couple of days and remind them of these things. But the BlackBerry as a platform is gone. Now it's Android. Now it's iPhone, but they still use that encryption layer. so they can talk to the people who have these things out in the field.
Right.
And it looked like there was this software that they were using for managing high value donors.
Mm-hmm.
That was Seth Rich. It was called the NGP Van software. And then
Right.
the subset of the super donors, if people remember, was called the Catalyst program. And the guy who ran the program was Mark Epstein, Jeff Epstein's brother. And what they would do is you'd say, okay, give 100,000 and then we'll flip the country and we'll see what the fund goes to. We're going to buy all the oil futures and gas futures and mineral futures and so forth. And let's say you get a 10-to-1 return. You have to leave the 100,000 that you pledged as your, information fee, your touting fee or whatever, and then you get the other 900.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it worked, And isn't it interesting that we talk about Mark Epstein with the Humpty Dumpty Society? Who gets a call from Mark Epstein before he goes live when he comes back out of the cold is Tucker Carlson. And then what else happens today? They drop the Jeff Epstein 177 names from the Lolita Express. They're trying to get us off of Mark Epstein as fast as they can. They just don't want that story out at all.
Yep. Well, if you let me see, stop, screen, present. If you're reading my book, or if you've read my book, then you know that if you go to Principle 6 and the takeover technique, it says that this concept outlines the machinations of the power elites, detailing their plans to manipulate and control the socioeconomic landscape to their advantage. The power elites concept hinges on establishing monopolies and seizing land from the aristocracy, thereby, again, this was written, this is a 1903 writing of something that was probably started around 1760. The aristocracy thereby controlling the fortunes of the unenlightened public. They intend to manipulate trade, industry, and particularly speculation to transfer wealth into their hands, effectively turning the public into a proletariat class. The power elite aims to foster a dependency on their super government, presenting it as a benefactor and a protector. They plan to weaken the aristocracy by burdening their land with debt. By the way, the middle class is the aristocracy now, ensuring their submission. By promoting luxury and manipulating wages and prices, they intend to deplete the resources of the unenlightened public while simultaneously undermining their industry. The power elite disguises their true intentions under the guise of serving the working class, using economic theories as propaganda tools. This abstract reveals the calculated efforts of a ruling elite to consolidate power and control through economic and social manipulation. So if you're reading my book, this lines up quite well with what George is talking about.
Yeah, I love it. I keep saying this is kind of the playbook of the deep state. And so, this is a great Christmas book. I promote the book on every space I do.
I've noticed, George, and thank you.
Yeah.
For that. Yeah.
And it's not even because I like you so much. It's because it's a great book, and it's because it is the playbook of the deep state. And the other one is McDuff's book, which is McDuff Lives, which is a guy who actually took the playbook and said, "Here's how I beat the deep state. I'm going to go right for the knot, this Office of Security. They call it SY for short. This guy named Wotepka." So, I mean, I'm just having the best time, with your book. Oh, sorry, this way. I'm just having the best time with your book and John's book because people are buying it and they're sharing it with their relatives that are not maybe, red pilled or clear pilled yet, and
right.
they're going, "Oh wow, that's really good. This is the guy you follow," and then now they're starting to follow you, which is cool.
Yeah, indeed, and it's funny because I had a little twinge when Kurt did. Oh, this guy handed me a self-published book on Richard's show. And Tony goes, "Yep, that's what they're going to do." Tony has a book too. I sent Tony a book. The reason that I don't really feel twingy about it is because I don't think this book sucks. I think this book is pretty solid. It doesn't overpromise, it doesn't underdeliver. It gives you exactly what I say it's going to give you, and it gives you a frame that you can use in order to start doing some critical analysis on things in the news and then comparing it to the things that you've read in my book. And you can determine for yourself whether or not people in 1903 or 1776 or however far back you want to go, if they understood this technology, and that's what I was meaning by culture being technology a few minutes ago, then maybe gears will start moving. You know, I don't watch television anymore. I don't watch any news. The only news that I watch is on Sunday nights. I do watch Grand Theft World, which I highly recommend, which is Richard Grove's epic like video podcast. It's like 7 or 8 hours. But he doesn't work. He doesn't podcast Monday through Saturday because he's doing other things, and he's got it all. He's got the news all kind of organized in a way that, you know, he's got either people who are sending him stuff, or he's putting things away that he recognizes. And then on Sunday night, he goes through all of it, but he references all of it to you know, his library and his encyclopedic knowledge of all of the events that have gotten us to here. And so I do highly recommend. I think that he's been blown off of YouTube so many times. I think that the handle that he uses on YouTube now is Cecil Rhodes. That's the channel that he's using. But those clips that I watch on his show on Sunday nights, that's pretty much all of the video stuff that I watch. And I was listening to Tucker Carlson the other night on Richard's show, talking about how he doesn't pay a lot of attention to the news and the media, or at least he didn't when he was doing his show, because he was too busy writing his show. And if you realize that, you know, if you've got a national show and you've got to do an hour's worth of content every night, 5 nights a week, you know how much prep it requires in order to be able to get ready to do a show. I can imagine that Tucker Carlson was head down and not paying any attention to anything except what he was writing a show about. So I do give him a little bit of a pass on not catching up on the things that we talk about on this channel.
Yeah, I always say if you got time for aliens, you got time for 5G. If you have time for 5G, you have time for the Blackberries. So,
well,
Alex is off on 5G, and Tucker's a little bit further out, like way beyond the stratosphere.
Yeah, Tucker did do his second UFO show, and I'm just shaking my head. You know,
I think they're taking the Elon thing too seriously. I think they're thinking that they're going to be like Major Tom, you know, to ground control. We got to bring it back in Almaville for a while. We're not ready for personal space travel just yet. We got to still worry about what's happening in Washington just for a couple of more news cycles. Maybe elections go away. I don't know. But
I you know, there's a lot of scuttlebutt in the Twitterverse right now that they only need the economy to last through the next election.
Till the robot polishers reunion, you know,
right,
you know, whatever. But I did want to say that because of this book, because I'm, you know, interacting with you, the Reframing Reality book, the next book, the big one coming,
which I have been working on. I'm not taking a powder on that. So
here's what'll happen to your normal everyday life. Okay. If you're a human, you'll go to Michigan, you'll go to a charrette where you're bringing a bunch of people together to do, you know, a health charrette about super antigens, and you're meeting doctors and so forth and other researchers. And then one of the people who started Neighborhood News will say, hey, I've got another retail space here. It's a supermarket, or, you know, one of these shopping centers is totally burned out. They've only got 2 businesses left. Exit 11 on I-75 going to Dearborn, where we were going. One of them is the House of, or the King of Buds, BUDZ, gigantic cannabis thing. And then the other one is right next to it is the House of Dank, another gigantic cannabis. Everything else is cleared. Dank. Yeah. So everything else is cleared out. It's 2 huge cannabis mega dealers competing, and he wants to put this thing in here. And I immediately say
he wants to put a newsroom between 2 weed shops.
Down the way a little bit. And I said, oh, I can reframe this reality. I can immediately make it Motor City News, right? Across the street is a Ford dealership with that.
This sounds like a George Carlin setup, George.
I'm going right where you.
Yeah.
This is reframing reality. You go, I got this. We'll take the 4 characters instead of Friends, being in New York where they're all living it up, it'll be like Motor City Friends. They're all unemployed or somehow not quite as employed as they should be when they were making the money at the Ford factory.
I think this could work. I think that if you set it up like Tim Pool's Timcast and you had people sitting around a table, I mean, you started to try to do that at one point, but I think that if you just stole that format of a board, like a boardroom table with cameras that are pasted on the walls going over everybody's shoulders. I think it's a genius idea, and the fact that you're between 2 weed shops that makes it that much better.
It's so perfect, and it's these guys and we had like 3 or 4 people who were Ford or ex-Ford, retirees, or had one, and it's in between Jeep, which is in Toledo, and Andy wanted to work for Jeep, so we thought, and so I came up with I used AI. I didn't really use AI for this, but I said, House of Deplorables. I wanted Basket of Deplorables, that was taken, so I just said, let's do House of Deplorables. Have the set there and everything.
Or deplorable news is deplorable.news.
Deplorable news is probably somebody's going to steal it from me right now. Deplorable news is a good
let me see if I can go steal it first. Here we go. It's probably taken, I'm guessing.
But there is a house, in Monroe, Michigan. You got the music. You remember Laverne and Shirley was about the beer factory. The 2 people that worked at the beer factory. It'd be sort of like a Laverne and Shirley for guys, Ford guys, and they would just be like commenting things from a world perspective of making cars for the world, or Jeeps for the world. I want to throw a Jeep guy in there because I love Jeeps. Fords are good.
The deplorable.news is taken, but it may be available if you give them $70. They'll find out if it's available.
I have House of Deplorables.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I bought House of Deplorables for 5 years.
Deplorable.info is available for $4 if you want that.
Here's Hillary coming, and let's say elections go away. Hillary gets put in, and elections go away. What are we left with?
I like the you could probably do the deplorable news or something like that.
And I wanted to make it funny, right? So you have House of Deplorables, so it's not all just news, right? You just throw in the news items every once in a while. You have like Dave, the computer guy, and he's talking about, well, what you should have been doing is learning this. You should have, he's always telling the guys who were working on the factory line that they should have chosen a different, and you just, it'd be fun. Andy's funny, Aaron's funny. We got a funny cast. We'll see where it goes.
This sounds like a very good idea.
Yeah.
I can remote in.
Yeah, you could be our coach. Like, you should have went into programming. You should have learned WordPress. So anyway.
Well, you woulda, shoulda, coulda. WordPress is still kind of like, I have a Winston Churchill attitude about WordPress. It's the worst online publishing platform except for all the other ones.
43% of the market, though, and I did some research on some AI tools, Mixo, and then there's a
bunch of AI plugins for WordPress now. I haven't had the
10 Webb is supposedly you can grab somebody else's thing and written in some other language, punch the URL in, and it'll spit out WordPress code. And then you can customize it.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting close to the point where it will write a WordPress plugin for you. There's a lot of nuance in writing plugins, so you want to make sure that they're not, memory hogs.
You're going to need the maestro, but this is bringing all the horn section and the violins and getting it all set up into an orchestra. Now you get Peter Duke, tap, tap, tap. Okay. But I'm not saying it's the final maestro, but at least it does a lot of the grunt work for you.
All right, let's take a look at some comments. Zaganostra, I want to see if I understand this. Zaganostra said, just reread Dostoevsky's notes from the underground and was thinking Peter Duke is not taking the psychology of the masses into account. Send me an email, contact@the Duke Report, and let me know what you're thinking I'm missing. The definition of the word mass that I'm using for my purposes is a large group of people who are programmed with media who do not think critically. There's a lot of different sociological interpretations of the word mass, which is why when George says mass formation psychosis, or people say mass formation, those are two different things. C. Wright Mills uses a slightly different. Well, I think my definition is more in line with C. Wright Mills. But I want to hear what you have to say, because I am always open to the idea that I may not have the whole picture. It's what keeps me from publishing. It's what kept me from publishing Reframing Reality in the first place. And I'm glad that I haven't published it yet. I'm glad that I published this book first, because I learned a lot of lessons in doing that. And I've learned how to figure out how to cover areas where you may not necessarily be an expert and you're not an expert. I think that's kind of the trick is not presenting yourself as an expert in something that you're not an expert in. So I'm perfectly willing to hear what you have to say. So send me an email, contact@the Duke Report. And because this isn't, the medium is the message, and this isn't the best way for me to understand that. Okay. Polly says the stealth power is making its way to Amsterdam. Hang on one second. Here, George, you talk for a second. I fill air for 30 seconds.
Oh, it's not going to be filling air. This is going to be an incredible insight into Dostoevsky's Notes from the Underground. It's a diary-style novel about a man who has isolated himself from society. The story is told by an anonymous narrator who is alienated from society and feels insignificant. The narrator describes his life, which is philosophically a monologue, right, about how much he hates everything, right? The narrator also exposes his own annoyance and unpredictability. This sounds like a barrel of fun already. This story takes place when the narrator is only 24 years old and he's working in the civil service. I think Dostoevsky actually did work in the civil service, if you want to, and it was hard to get those jobs. That meant you ate in Russia at that time, right? He wants to make friends with his coworkers. He could be a character on House of Deplorables, but at other times he hates them and feels all alone. Okay, the narrator criticizes himself for being too romantic, and then digresses about romanticism. Peter should have muted his mic. This novel is considered a great achievement of existential thought. And it illustrates the existence of a single individual's struggle to exist, define himself, and to belong.
Well, George, I thought I was going to, I know that I was going to get the hardbound versions, but I got 3 cases of paperbacks. So I'm going to be able to offer signed versions of the book now, because I couldn't get them before.
Collector's copies, $100.
And I heard the door knock, when we started the show. So I thought that the hardback versions were there, and I haven't seen the hardback version yet. So I wanted to go look at that. But.
Wow, that's exciting. Well, anyway, I summarized Notes from the Underground. And
okay.
I'll just say this. I think Dostoevsky was trying to do a House of Deplorables, but Ford hadn't happened yet. So I'll go ahead and finish that off for Dostoevsky.
Okay, Underground. Ford hadn't happened yet?
Automobiles had not happened yet. One of Dostoevsky's big stories is about looking at all these people in very cold St. Petersburg coming in to look at an alligator or a crocodile. I can't remember which.
Yeah.
Because they've never seen an alligator or a crocodile. And that was a big thing, right? So I don't know why that's related to alienation, but it's got to be.
All right. Okay, here we go. JBGT3 says, yep, he doesn't question Malone. I think he's talking about Jimmy Dore. He doesn't know enough to question him. and this is the danger of counterintelligence assets is that moving you from one non-truth area to another non-truth area has the same effect on the person that you're targeting as it does as moving them from a non-truth area to a truth area. That is, Jimmy Dore doesn't have enough domain understanding. I didn't have enough domain understanding until George started explaining, Mark Kulak started explaining, other people started explaining the holes in the Robert Malone story and the questions unanswered by Robert Malone that make people suspicious of him. If we could answer those questions, maybe we don't need to be suspicious of Robert Malone. But unless he answers those questions, then there's always going to be a giant question mark next to him, or like a somebody who breaks the home run.
The asterisk.
There's always an asterisk next to their little record in the record book. So there's always.
Peter, the good news here is literally it is domain knowledge that makes or breaks Bob Malone, because it's OMANE. And the person who broke that story was Mark Kulak, as you correctly
right. And that's not a pun.
Not a pun. It's the real deal.
Just happens to be a domain problem. There's a domain
problem. Yeah, literally.
Okay. So Key Jason says, were early BlackBerry phones actually secure? Metadata through preferred telecom?
No. That was added by Dmitry Alperovich. We bought a company called PGP. He added the encryption layer. The SS7 network to send messages, which was the interoperability network, is very insecure and it's been hacked a lot. Think about it. You have to send it to another carrier for them to forward it on to their people, right? So it's by nature not secure. And BlackBerry, actually, Steve Jobs was the first person to point this out, that your messages were actually going all the way to the contested area between India and Pakistan. Even if you're a producer in Hollywood talking about a new movie you want to do, House of Deplorables probably, right? And you're sending it over to Peter Duke, it's going all the way to Pakistan. Now, why would it be doing that unless they're ripping it off and collecting all of it and using it to spy on you, So there was a lot of problems right from the get-go. And to Steve Jobs' credit, he said—
These guys might know. These guys might know. These guys know.
Yeah, they know.
They know why it was going to Pakistan.
Jobs, when he sold the iPhone, it originally came out, he goes, and your messages don't go to Pakistan. Use the message, because Apple has a contained network and it doesn't farm it out overseas. Yeah.
All right. So this is always a dangerous question for me. This is always, again, I don't know everything. I don't pretend to know everything. I'm open to understanding things. JBTG. So this is the guy who, if it's a guy, I assume it's a guy. And if you're not a guy, I guess Jimmy Dore has a whole routine about how you can call guys. Was Jimmy Dore or was it Kurt? It was the woman who did the opening, the warm up for Jimmy, was talking about how guys has become vernacular, but the only time that you can't use hey guys in a conversation is if you're talking to trans people, because then you're misgendering them. You can call a waitress can walk up to a table full of women and go, okay guys, what do you want? And nobody gets offended. But if you go to a trans table, then they get offended. Anyway, JBGT3. Have you read Final Warning by David Allen Rivera? No, I haven't. And here, I'll do a little screenshot here of this so that I don't forget it. And it's always dangerous when you ask me questions like this, because then I wind up reading books like The Controversy of Zion, which leads me to things like The History and Destiny of the Jews by Joseph Castine, and The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. And then I wind up getting my entire frame reframed. So I'll go take a look at that.
The book is called Final Warning.
Yeah, the final warning. Maybe we should just go look at it. Hang on a second.
A group of international bankers secretly meet off a small island on the coast of Georgia. That kind of sounds like Jekyll Island, doesn't it?
Sure does. Is this like the witness tree of Jekyll Island?
The plan was to formulate a program to destroy the financial structure of America. To do this, they pushed Woodrow Wilson into the presidency. Sounds pretty close to what happened. And in 1913, Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act and the Federal Income Tax Act. In 1921, these international bankers established the Council on Foreign Relations. The government took advantage of CFR's experience in finance and foreign affairs in one of their study groups. And they called it the Advisory Committee on Post-War Foreign Policy and became part of the State Department in 1941. The secret goal of the study group was to condition Congress and the people in the country to accept the establishment of the United Nations.
I'm looking at the cover of this book, and it looks familiar to me. Like I might have actually put this book on the cover of the Duke in the book section of the Duke Report. I have to go check. Hang on a second.
Sounds interesting.
But it doesn't sound that much different from.
There's something of Jekyll Island.
I mean, I've read quite a few books on the same subject, so forgive me if I'm spacing this, but final warning, here we go. Final warning, a history of the New World Order. I'll go check. This may actually already be on the Duke Report. I just haven't read it yet. And just to let you know what my strategy is that if I run into books that I want to read, but I don't have time to read, I put them on the Duke Report book section, because it's just kind of like, if I had a library and I thought, well, I want to read this book one day, but I don't have time to read it right now, I go buy it and I stick it in the shelf. In my little teeny apartment, I've kind of maxed. You can see the shelf up here that I put that goes from wall to wall up there. Every flat surface of my apartment is covered with books right now.
The Creature of Jekyll Island, I think, is something that you probably want to read first before this book, just because it's, Ed Griffin and has all these red pill meetings, and it's a lingua franca, if you will. And then the other book, which is Less Tragedy, More Hope, is also a treatment that you probably should read. It's a shorter book. I'm not talking about the big one, Tragedy.
And people can get Less Tragedy, More Hope by subscribing to your Substack and finding it on the book section of your Substack. Is that correct?
Well, I was talking about the one you have on the Duke Report. You could also buy this one that I threw over to Addie, and it's on his. You can get it that one on Amazon.
Yep.
Yeah. But I mean, I think these are all, that sounds an awful lot like those two books, is what I'm saying. This final warning sounds a lot like those two books.
Right. And one of the things that I got out of, like I said, I got out of Douglas Reed's book and my project on stealth power is that you were talking about Blackberries. And one of the things that seems to go back as far as recorded history, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, is that people have always understood the power of communication at distance and the ability to control and read other people's mail, for lack of another way of doing it. Which is why John Dee, in the 1580s and 1590s was developing encryption schemes for the communications between himself and Queen Elizabeth I and other people like that. That the Freemasons were very good. They had to have, starting with the Templars, going back to the Templars, George was talking about having a financial system, having the ability to write a check meant that you needed to be able to verify that that check was correct in a zero trust environment, right? So how do you do that? You have to be able to encrypt certain things so that people can decrypt them, do things like that. So communications has the whole history of communications has always, I mean, do you think that when they laid the transatlantic cables, this is in the book, The Witness Tree that we're reading right now. Do you think that when they laid the transatlantic cables that intercepting messages going between different State Departments wasn't a high priority for the people that were laying those cables? Because it was.
Yep.
So Communications, all of these things, they're not 100% based on electronics. Technology, like I said, the definition of the word that I use is an invention or a process for doing something better than you could do it before. So there it is. Zagonostra says, is it possible that stealth power has accurately assessed the moronic state of the masses? Kind of like Eric Fromm and Escape from Freedom. Most people couldn't care less, could care less about PD critical thinking. Idiocracy did a pretty good job of it too. And again, the meat of the book, the 24 protocols that I turned into principles by running each paragraph through GPT, is not my original idea. I translated it. I mean, I wrote the first chapter, I wrote the last chapter, and then I translated the chapters and the 24 chapters in between. So it's not really my opinion. It's the opinion of the people who are the supposed authors of the document. So I'm not laying claim to being the author of the center of the 24 chapters in the middle. I'm the translator of those things.
Eric Fromm's book, 1941, Escape from Freedom, explores the psychological origins of freedom and the challenges of living in a modern democratic society.
Okay. Eric Fromm.
The book explains the relationship between individuality, conformity, and the need for human belonging. It also explains humanity's shifting relationship with freedom and how individual freedom could cause fear, anxiety, and alienation. Fromm's central idea is that humanity cannot live with the dangers and responsibilities inherent in freedom, will probably turn toward authoritarianism.
All right. Well, again, this is another book that this is how I do it, folks. I add it onto the book report list. And then when I have a spare moment, I go and I add it onto the Duke report so that you could. But what I'm noticing that I like is that it's got an Audible version.
That's nice.
And so, yeah, getting it on Audible is always a bonus because that means it's something that you can consume while you're at the gym, which is something that I need to start going back to. I haven't gone to the gym in a while. Here we go. Hamish62 says, Lomas and Knight's first book, which almost got them killed, The Hiram Key, delineates a lot of both history going back to the Egyptian rites. Yeah, okay. I'm assuming this is Hiram Abiff. The Hiram Key. We can go look at this too. Yeah, again, I try as much as I can. And this is just here's a spoiler alert. Hang on a second, Hiram, and this is Amazon does this thing. I can demonstrate how frustrating this is to me. So Amazon has this thing where I will click in the search bar here, and I will try to search for something, and then when I go to type, then it changes the focus, and then I find that I'm not typing in the search bar anymore, and I have to go type in it again. So.
The Hiram Key, Pharaohs, Freemasonry, and the Discovery of Secret Scrolls of Jesus is a 1996 book by Christopher Knight and Robert Lomas. The authors, both Freemasons, present a theory of the origins of Freemasonry as part of the true story of the historical Jesus and the original Jerusalem church.
Yep. All right. So I've added this to the list. And let me just tell you what my spoiler was that I was going to tell people is that I watched Stu Peters on Alex Jones, and Stu Peters' contention is that the cabal who runs the world are the descendants of Khazarian Jews, which Bill Taylor has written several articles about, and there's a lot of contention around that. There are others people who claim that it's the Jesuits, and other people who claim it's the Freemasons, and other people who claim it's the Illuminati. And my contention at this point is that it is all of them, but not all of the members of each group. Because if you read my book, The Stealth Power and the Illusion of Democracy, you'll see that infiltration is a big part. And if you read the Fabian Milner conspiracy, where Beatrice Webb talks about permeation, that infiltrating existing groups and turning them to your own purposes is the metadata, is the information. And so is it any one of the, to focus on any one group is to ignore all the other groups. And so while I do pay attention to Freemasons, I do pay attention to the Knights Templar, I do pay attention to Zionists, I do pay attention to Jesuits and all of those things, you can't pin the New World Order conspiracy on one of them. Because as Shiva points out, the members of each one of those groups who are interacting with the members of the other groups are kind of a swarm. And what they count on is the anti-Semitism thing. They count on you saying, oh, it's the Jews, because then they can sick the ADL on you and they can get rid of you. And that's a trap. So I think that identifying any single ethnography as being associated with the New World Order is a trap. That's my jaded one-sided. So I look at those things, but I try not to get too crazy about committing too much of my time there. John Renner wants to know if you've ever been to Jekyll Island, George.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I went there and
did your Indian, your Native American chromosomes tingle a little when you got there?
Yeah, I felt like I was about 64 to 128 times more Native American than Elizabeth Warren. I felt my multiple of 64 go to like 128. I saw the sea turtles. You know, you remember there was the poem Across a Wide Sargasso Sea, this circular flow, and the turtles go in that flow, the Sargasso Sea. So if you go to Jekyll Island, there's a turtle thing there, big turtle, you know, the big sea turtles. And that's a fun thing to visit there on Jekyll Island.
All right, Dave Fitz asked this question. I think it's rhetorical. If you translate the original, who gets the royalties? I don't know. I don't care. It was written in 1903. There's 500 different versions of it available. I don't think anybody's paying royalties to, what was the guy's name? I don't know. I have all of the names. And it was plagiarized. Do you have to pay royalties on something that was plagiarized, George? I don't know.
Is Dave asking you, are you going to pay royalties on your book, or is he asking about a book called Who Pays the Royalties?
Well, that's your next book, George.
Yeah. There are no royalties in this business, let me tell you. I think you make them like Peter.
I think you catch as catch can. I mean, one of the things that I've realized too is when I go to buy books, so there's a lot of books that I want to buy that are out of print. And when I get them, like this book here, Terrorism and the Illuminati. This is a really good book, if you can get through all the genealogy part. But I've gotten to a point where I don't pay as much attention to the genealogy. I skim the genealogies because he'll do like 3 paragraphs of genealogy. All you need to do is read the first sentence and then the last sentence, and you get all the juice. Because everything else is like, this person married this person who had this child who married that person. And but the thing is about this book is that it's not really available. I did get it. Let me see when I bought it. Did it get printed? There's a lot of books that are only available as like bad PDFs on Internet Archive, but then they wind up showing up on Amazon. And when you buy them, it's like somebody downloaded the bad PDF off of Internet Archive. Then they went into Kindle publishing, and then they've just bootlegged it. And they're just selling it on Amazon bootleg. And because the original author is dead, or it was self-published, or the publishing company isn't paying any attention, you wind up buying these bootleg books on Amazon. And it's kind of a pain it's kind of a pain because when you get the book, they're not easier to read than the bad PDF that they have on Internet Archive.
Dave, good question for Dave. It's like, who pays when they print the Bible? Who pays the royalties on that? You know, the Bible has a lot of different versions, and it makes me interested in that Jerusalem church, because the Jerusalem church I thought was in the old city of Jerusalem, and so how that could be associated with Tyre, which, you know, is 105 miles north. The only thing I can think of that would connect those dots is Paul. I think Paul went through the road to Damascus and then he went over to Tyre for a while. But that's an interesting thing of how there is going to be some kind of cryptography in Tyre, and that's going to keep all the Christians together. That's an interesting premise.
Right. Well, yeah, Joseph Castine's book, which is available to people who are members of the Duke Report. You can go to the ebook section where I try to take books that are out of print that you can't buy anywhere and turn them into EPUBs. And one of those books that I did do is The History and Destiny of the Jews by Dr. Joseph Castine, that was published in Germany in 1931 in German and then translated into English. You know, Paul is a very interesting character because Paul was the only disciple that didn't actually meet Jesus, and is largely responsible for the epistemological organization of the what became the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And that makes him and he's an ex-Pharisee. So in the book, The History and Destiny of the Jews by Castine, he points out that if you watched Ben Shapiro's description of Jesus on the Joe Rogan show, that pretty much matches what Castine was saying in the book, that they thought that Jesus was a nothing burger. But the person that they have a lot of animus for is Paul, because Paul organized and figured out a way to take the work of the other apostles and then put it together in a way that it winds up becoming the Catholic Church. So
not a big deal, but like between Jerusalem and Damascus, on the road to Damascus,
yes,
where Jesus, I think, does appear as an apparition.
Yes, to Paul. Yeah,
to Paul. So yeah. You didn't mean meet Jesus physically. You meant
he didn't meet him. He didn't meet him physically.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, he when he was alive, they were never in the same place at the same time.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah, that's what I wanted to
right.
clear that up, because I know that there are Bible scholars out there that are going to go, he met him at the thing, and I'm like, yes, as an apparition, right?
I love this
question.
He
screamed out, right? And all the people that were with him were Peter and all the gang. They're like, what are you screaming about? So what? I think I know why.
I love this question. Zaganostra says, your attempts to help people develop critical thinking skills is laudable, but is it a fool's errand? I say to my wife at least once a week, when we're dealing with the dummies, I have a neighbor. And there was a robbery, George. There was an armed robbery a block from my house a week ago. And my neighbor, who I like, he's a nice guy, was tweeting about it. And he tweets a lot of stuff about guns. And he tweets a lot of stuff about things that would put you on an FBI watch list in about 5 seconds. He tweets about that stuff all of the time. And, I look at stuff like that. I look at tweets like that, and I wonder whether or not, helping people develop critical thinking skills is a good idea or not. But at that point, the question that you need to ask yourself, well, why don't I just figure out a way to get myself into the ruling elite and just learn how to use all the skills that I've developed in order to continue taking advantage of people the same way they do, because that certainly seems to be a way to afford a $6 million house there or $12 million house there. That seems to be what those people are doing. I don't think I could sleep at night. I think that trying to make the world a better place, trying to practice a Sermon on the Mount skill set is what wakes me up every morning. And if I weren't doing that, I don't know that I could live with myself. And I don't think that I would be happy about the world that I would leave to my children. So that's kind of the short answer.
Yeah, it's kind of like, do you like something? You know, do you like walking? Some people don't. Some people do. You know, you like helping people think critically.
Yeah, I mean, I do. And again, to me, the key to thinking critically is just learning how to ask that first question. Like, Mike Cernovich's interview on 60 Minutes when the reporter told him something about how he mischaracterized something that Hillary Clinton said. And Mike said, "How do you know that?" And the reporter, it was Scott Pelley. Scott Pelley said, "Well, the campaign told us." And Mike's question was, "Well, why did you believe them?" Why do you believe something is probably the best first question that you could ever ask yourself. When somebody tells you something, why do you believe that? And that's, there's a book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And the guy, Robert Pirsig, who wrote that book, describes the nervous breakdown that he had because he was grading papers. And the woman watering plants in his office while he was grading papers said, "I hope you're teaching quality today." And he kind of tripped out. The entire book is him tripping out on the word quality. What does quality mean? Why do we believe that one thing has got more quality than another? What is the qualia? That winds up becoming a deep philosophical question. But people who ask themselves those questions are a lot more enlightened than people who are the mass. To your earlier point, to JBTG, I think it was, or Zaganostra's point about the mass. I think that humanity would be better off if we got hit by a big EMP right now. I think that the reset would, because who would survive? The critical thinkers. The mass wouldn't survive. The only people surviving would be the critical thinkers. So I put it there. Last comment. Peter, your book provides a decent example of how to use ChatGPT for research. I hope so. I hope it really does, because I do think that there's a lot of arcane language. There's a lot of academic speak. There's a lot of bafflegab that's out there in the world. And if you're just trying to get to the juice, as George Webb would say, a lot of times you can just take something that you don't understand, paste it into GPT and say, explain this to me in the way that that a 12-year-old would understand or a 15-year-old would understand. And it will take the same idea and it will reformat it in a way that you can understand it. Because while I don't believe it's ever going to be a replacement for a knowledge base, a real knowledge base. It might. It's not there yet. It is always going to be a great tool for linguistics. It's always going to be a tool for taking language and helping you understand something in a way that you couldn't understand it before. And for that reason, I'm a big fan of GPT, but I'm not advocating it as a replacement for doing real research.
I agree. It's just a way of going through more alternatives quicker, like a CAD program for architects. You could show your client what you're thinking quicker, and you could do 3D rotations where it would have taken you days to do a takeoff. Now you can do a spin, and your client can evaluate more alternatives. So I think it's the same sort of thing when architects got CAD.
Indeed. So if you like this show and you want to support this show, you can go to, George is showing you can go to thedukeport.com/shop and you can buy George more 3X size pieces of clothing. Or
yourself, or your loved ones.
Or yourself or your loved one. Although I think it's a little late for Christmas at this point, but there you go. Quigley and
No, somebody just ordered this and I got it in one day.
Really?
Yeah, you can.
It is amazing. Amazon told me that these were not going to be available to me until after like January 19th or something, and I just got 3 cases of them.
We got it in 2 days. We ordered it and we got it in 2 days.
The book thing blows my mind. This thing blows my mind. This book was printed
probably an hour ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. And wow, it's
I
got a
think
bunch of.
Jimmy Dore is playing a trick on you. I think he's at the door, and I think he was going to say, "Now let's see what happens when we knock on the door."
It's funny because this book
And then
has
he's all
got.
dressed up like the Pope guy.
It's funny because this book has got 4 blank pages in the end of it that I did that wasn't in the file that I sent. Anyway, but it's a good place to take notes. You can.
Yeah.
It's got a place for notes in the back. These things get. I order these things and they're at people's houses in 48 hours, and they haven't been printed yet. Like, it's kind of crazy. But if you want to.
Thank you for whoever bought this for me, because it didn't say when it came from the thing. So thank you.
It's Jan here.
We sent you a Sherlock Holmes t-shirt. Yes, thank you to everybody. Because thank you to everybody for everything that we've been getting lately. George, I think I might need to get a post office box for the new year. We'll see. If you want to support this channel, you can go to thedukereport.com/buy-me. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/the Duke Report, and you can become a member of the Duke Report, where you have access to things like I said, EPUBs that I'm working on, and one of the books that I recommended is reasonably priced in the United States, but I found out that it's really stupidly expensive in Australia for no good reason. So I'm going to try to figure out a way for one of our members to get a less expensive. Maybe I'll buy it and send it to her or something. But there's lots of perks if you become a member of the Duke Report. George and I do a Zoom call once a month where you can ask us questions directly. And we have good conversations. We talk about stuff that we can't talk about on the open internet. And so it's a much more candid kind of way to talk. And if you want to support George Webb, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/George Webb, no E, number 1. Or you can go to georgewebb.substack.com and you can become a subscriber to George's Substack, where he writes a few articles a week, and he includes reprints of all of the over 50 books that George has written on all the different subjects that we talk about on this show. And I think you've got about 24, 25 of them posted already, George. And
my latest one's on super antigens.
On super antigens, F-18 Super Hornet. That plane is got a little mention in it's interesting because it's got a 6 on it, George, but it looks like a 2-seater. And the only 2-seater in the Blue Angels is the 7. Look, and the only reason I know that is because I spend a day with those guys. So it's got the.
What's the 323 mean, or 328 mean?
I don't know. Maybe the squadron that the plane was originally attached to, because those are actually real gray. Those are the gray fighter versions, so they've just painted blue. And usually, what happens is, I think when a pilot gets assigned to the Blue Angels, he flies off the carrier with the plane that he's assigned on the carrier, and then they replace it on the carrier. So it's
I'm being informed at the International News Desk that the 7 now is a woman that flies this plane.
Well, the 7 is the 7 is the trainer. So the first 6 are the combat versions, and then the 7 is the trainer. Anyway, with that, George, I will see you again on Thursday, which will be the 21st. And then we're going to have to figure out, I don't know what day Christmas is or not. So we'll have to go look at a calendar and figure that out. But in any case, thanks for sticking with us this long, everybody. And thanks for all of the things that you've sent us. And I will be figuring out how to do signed versions of the book soon. And with that, I will say good night. I'm going to go make myself a smash burger.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you, Peter, and Merry Christmas. And thank you for all the people who sent the nice clothing and gifts. So
yeah, Merry Christmas, everybody. And thanks for everything that you do to support this channel. We really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.